This week on AtoZrunning, when the pressure is high and expectations abound, performance can suffer. But it doesn't have to. Even for runners who feel like race day pressures are insurmountable, certain deliberate strategies and the right practice of those strategies can change everything.
Welcome back to AtoZrunning. My name is Andy.
And I'm Zach, and we're going to be talking about cross country a bunch in the next couple of weeks because that's just what's happening at the moment in the running universe. NCAA cross country championships are happening probably after or before you hear us talking right now, but we have not seen the results yet. And so we can't report on it yet, but we will be. And then you have all of the high school championships. I say all of them because now it's like there isn't like a high school championship anymore. It's just a bunch of them. And it kind of depends on which ones athletes do. But Nike Cross and Brooks Cross Country Championship, which used to be Foot Locker. But remember, Foot Locker said, nah, after all of those years, we don't want to do it anymore. So now it's Brooks, but it's the same thing. And then of course we have like U.S. cross country and World cross country, which is held in Florida this year, which is exciting. Except that the Americans still aren't going to be racing it much, not the top tier athletes. So cross country is on our minds right now, and we had competed in cross country as athletes.
Yeah.
And it was definitely different. It was different than track. It was different than road running as adults, especially. How did you feel about it, Andy? How did you feel about cross country?
I liked the team.
Mm.
I enjoyed the training, the sport of it. I, however, did not feel like I figured out cross country. So I did not rise to the level that others and myself expected. So it was a little lackluster. Comparatively, if you were to compare it to track, which I think they are two different sports,
Well,
I was definitely better in track than I was at cross country. But I don't know. It wasn't that I didn't like it. It just didn't. It is harder to enjoy the races when you don't feel like you're living up to your potential.
no doubt. And there's a reason for that. Cross country and track in particular are distinctly different sports. They have many different qualities to them, and you will regularly see an athlete who is highly successful in cross country that just can't quite meet that same level of success on the track, and the opposite. And that's probably the norm, in fact, more than the exception. And I think that it's a pretty clear reason why cross country is more like trail running than it is like road and track running. And so depending on the nature of your physiology, there's some potential pros and cons there. But also, it's a different kind of execution. A cross-country race is not, it's more of playing the elements and having to interact with the elements of the course itself. And it's significantly less about just who's faster. And you notice that because you see people finishing top 10 or 20 in a cross-country championship level race who are nowhere near that level on the track. They might still finish, top 20 in a single track event, but there's dozens of people that are faster than them. Their times are not those top threshold times. So what's actually the exception is when you get an athlete who does something like track, cross-country, and roads all at a very high level. Those are super special athletes. Very uncommon. Connor Mantz is an example of one.
That's awesome.
In fact, and that's been an exciting part about his career. He was a multiple-time NCAA cross-country champion 2 years in a row, and which very rarely has happened over the years. He was also excellent on the track, although his track career was short. He went very quickly from college running to marathoning. And it was abundantly clear why. His coach saw a potential for something and wanted to try to maximize
and was
that.
correct.
And was correct. And so Connor Mantz now the American record holder in both the half marathon and the marathon. And so having that kind of prowess in all three is no small feat. you see that at a global stage too. It's very rare that you have an athlete who is that successful in all of those areas, but there are a handful, and they really rise to the fore. Helen Obiri is one of those, by the way. She's been good at every single thing.
Everything she's ever done. I have to say, though, before we move on from this conversation, that Zach often would do better in some instances in cross country than he would on paper before the meet as far as times go, right?
Yeah,
so, like, for instance, that you can talk about that one year that you ran the USATF Club Nats and then you were selected.
Well, sure. Yeah, I certainly finished better relative to other runners in cross country than track. And so I was an example of one of those that cross country just suited my capacities more naturally than track did. And I don't know why. I don't actually have a clear understanding why.
Well, I think we can look at like some correlation, which would be that you're also good at steeplechase. So interruptions do not interrupt you as much as other people like me who have maybe some issues with stability and with momentum. I always did better on a road course that was flat and straight and the track because I was not good at interruption, and you are good at interruption.
Well, so that's actually the point that could be made. That was a rival coach in college who had made a comment to me at one point about that, and he was actually recommending some things that I consider in the post-college running to try to maximize this, but that was his observation. Is he said that everything that he sees suggests that disruptions or breaking up the monotony of the run itself, the race, seems to be something that benefits me. And so it's one of two pathways there, and both of them are probably worthy of pursuit. The one is finding ways mentally to break up a race that's otherwise monotonous. So even if it's not naturally broken up by things like jumping stuff or hills or that kind of thing, to break it up into chunks in my head and tackle each chunk separately. That never worked very well for me. For some reason, that strategy was one I couldn't ever quite implement with any degree of success. But the other side of it was then just really working on being better at racing within the routine, monotonous lap after lap track kind of thing. And I did improve in that area, not spectacularly, but that's something that's gotten better over the years. And so, yes, those capacities seemed to benefit me. I always enjoyed cross country more as well. I just loved running cross country. And it took a while before I loved running track. That didn't come naturally, not at first. And so, yeah, I had some relative to other runners greater successes in cross country than anywhere else, and that allowed me to do some other pretty cool opportunities over the years. But
it's cross country is the only team that you've competed for Team USA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So he competed for Team USA as part of the cross country group in Jamaica.
It was
what year was
North
it?
America, Central America Championships. So it's one of those like small regional
international
championships. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And that team side of it is the other part that's distinct about cross country, and this is why the cross country season at the collegiate level has so much excitement around it, because it's the only running sport that is in fact a true team sport, cross country, where you actually compete team against team in the same event. It does not happen anywhere else. You can say a relay is a team sport, but it's actually not. Relay teams are just an individual entity because it's still not necessarily any kind of like connection to the rest of your track team. They do score, and some teams care about that, but very few do, and most it doesn't matter because they don't have enough scoring potential to actually win a team track competition. But in cross country, it's exactly that. Team strategy plays a factor. Team execution plays a factor. You're no longer running a race by yourself in your own head. You're running a race relative to your teammates and what your role is within your team to try to compete. And that is exciting and fun and something different. So we'll get a little bit of everything. We'll get some individual stuff. We'll get some team stuff. And all in between, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for cross country. But in fact, we don't have much to report on yet this week. We've got some other interesting things to share with you. The first on the docket being a reflection around how we as runners can deal with things like pressure and expectation. We've talked about the challenges those pose, but what about strategies to actually diminish the negative impact they might hold? That's next, so stick around. So on the topic of mindset and on the topic of the implications of our psychology on our physiology, there's a question that we haven't exactly attempted to address in the last few episodes as we've been reflecting on these things. And that is, if pressure and expectation, that weight of expectation, if those things affect us physiologically, trying to diminish them from the one angle we have been talking about, which is addressing what happens with mismatch and how to reduce the hazard score that we experience because of expectations and some of those things. What about the paralyzing effect of just the pressure that I place on myself? And I run races, and when the pressure's high, I just can't perform as well. When the pressure's low, I seem to just be able to run freely and have a great opportunity.
Or opposite, I don't really run very well until I have a big meet, and then I rise to the occasion and I run better than I anticipated I am able to. That happens too.
That's true. We're not going to try to talk about that side right now, because that's great. That's just good. So take full advantage. That's what the mismatch theory, the opposite end of the hazard score, is the importance factor. The higher the importance factor, the greater suffering we're willing to endure. But we're talking about the psychological effects of the expectation creates negative pressure. And so what do I do with that? And it's a common experience for runners. We hear it all the time as we're talking with athletes. We've experienced it ourselves personally in various capacities. Andy, maybe not as much as others because she's a performer. Performance makes Andy just do amazing things. She rises to the occasion. It's really an incredible reality.
There have been times, and I can see that as a theme throughout, but there have been other times where I completely am destroyed by it. So it's kind of, this is a good conversation and can benefit me too, because you don't want to be a pendulum.
Okay, so question for the listeners. How many runners, if you were a high school athlete and you were contractually bound to earning a full ride scholarship to college if you ran a certain time, you had to run that fast enough time, and if you did, you'd get a full ride scholarship to college. How many would that be a positive motivator, and how many feel like that would be crippling? For most, in fact, it is a kind of combination of both. It's a really interesting reality, but it often is crippling for people. Andy rose to the occasion. It was, in fact, a positive motivator for her, which is great. That was the intent, perhaps, of all parties. That was certainly the mindset was set a benchmark, and this is I'm generalizing. Set a benchmark and then raise the stakes for achieving that benchmark, and we can rise to the occasion. It motivates us, right? It spurs us on to new heights. That's the kind of fight or flight dynamic, and so. When you're faced with the survivalist challenge and you choose to fight, then the fight is that much more. You just fight harder, and yet, we talk with runners all the time under the following scenario. Let me just lay it out for you. Here's the scenario we're going to use as we discuss the topic today. A runner has trained for months for this one big race. It's the culmination of a season, maybe even the culmination of years of trying to achieve some goal or another. And that runner is definitely ready. So the runner knows training has been rock solid, fitness is clearly there, the goal is within reach. Everything says this is possible. But the runner is nervous. This is the big chance, possibly the last chance in the foreseeable future. So many runners will do this. Like, I'm going to give it one big try, and then I've got other things, and so I'm not going to be able to train like this, at least for a little while.
Oh, so there's a cutoff for like a Boston qualifier?
Yep, cutoff time. Like, I can qualify for this year's Boston, and if I miss it, I have to wait a whole another year, that kind of stuff. So pressure's high. Friends and family are there, adding to the pressure. They're there to watch and support, making it feel like an even more significant moment. True. Runner also has a history of struggling in these high-pressure situations. And so the nervousness, the weight of expectation, those kinds of things. Self-imposed or external or both. And so it's sometimes it's the things other people are saying to, sometimes it's the thoughts inside. So then the question is, what next? What can be done? Because this matters. But it feels like the stakes themselves are imposing some kind of restrictions. So here's what happens. Research tells us that these things do have a potential to negatively diminish our performance. And the rationale is multi-layered, but one of the key components is that there is what would essentially be described as a healthy range of stress. We've talked about this before. There's an amount of stress that is good, that motivates us, inspires us. It keeps us focused, but it's not debilitating. There's two problems with stress. One is too much and the other is too little. So too little stress is attached to all sorts of psychological maladies, things like depressive states, things like lack of motivation, some of that kind of stuff. When your stress levels are too low and your body's not releasing enough cortisol, then you tend to feel uninspired, unmotivated. It's hard to summon the will to do a thing. And sometimes that can be chronic and debilitating, and other times it can just be in the moment. But it's not good to have too little cortisol in your body. And why is that? Because cortisol is linked to things like energy production, cellular metabolism, and so cortisol helps facilitate energy production. And cortisol is linked to other kinds of things like dopamine and adrenaline release, like other types of hormone interactions. Cortisol itself is one of those types of hormones. And so it's valuable and important. And we need some amount of positive, or some amount of stress is positive. On the other side, too much stress then is also negative. And now that's linked with a number of other things, psychological maladies on the other side of it, and like high blood pressure and, conditions that are physiological in nature, as well as like worry and chronic worry, anxiety, and things like that. And so too much stress, too much cortisol, actually what it happens is it initially is positive when there's like an injection of a significant amount of stress. And this is where you get things like the story where the mother can somehow lift the car off of the child who is trapped underneath, right? How is that possible? Well, part of it is because the injection of a significant amount of cortisol in the moment, it like heightens everything. It significantly raises all of the systems in your body. It's kind of just like what would happen if you get a shot of adrenaline, literally. And so what happens, though, over time is chronic exposure to high levels of cortisol in your body, or consistent or regular exposure, desensitizes your body to the cortisol. And so it stops responding to the increased cortisol and then produces a kind of cortisol tolerance, which, if you were to say, so cortisol itself can help regulate inflammation, but chronic high levels of cortisol actually do the opposite, where then you end up with an inflammatory response as opposed to helping regulate inflammation. So there's a lot of, I'm not going into all of the specific sciences behind what cortisol is doing in your body, but trying to generalize the principles here. So that tells us then that stress is good in certain amounts, and it's especially good when it's not the same all the time. And so ebbs and flows in small amounts is where you find the right balance of your physiological response to stress. So when the runner experiences the situation and the stress levels are too high and that can inhibit performance, what does the research tell us about what we can do? What can help us? And it tells us very clearly that psychological interventions like mindfulness and relaxation, certain meditative kinds of things, they help. They actually literally reduce the cortisol levels in your body. Not the ones that are already present and flowing, but the injection of additional cortisol. And so that tells us that, I mean, all it's really saying, they're giving you a biological measurement of what's happening psychologically, which is just you're experiencing less stress. So what can we do to make that happen? That's the question. If it's true, what are the things and what can we do about it? And so we've got a handful. We're going to give you, I want to dig into the study very briefly, what they said, but we're going to give you our suggestions of a handful of psychological interventions or strategies. They call them stress management strategies in this study. And so the things that the study suggests are the things that work better than others. There are certain things that work better than others. And then what we think we could do with those. So here's what the study says. And I say this one study, I'm actually talking about a study that's a meta-analysis of just about everything they could find in the last 20 years on managing stress. And they were very deliberate about being rigorous. And so they excluded a lot of studies that did not have a rigorous enough study methodology. And so this 2024 meta-analysis suggests that where did my research go? Oh, here it is. It suggests that you implement certain kinds of strategies and you can see those cortisol levels reduce. And what they found was mindfulness as a kind of strategy was among the most effective, along with what they call relaxation interventions. And so a relaxation intervention is similar to mindfulness, but it could also be some other kind of like meditative techniques, and according to their studies.
So where would this fall into line? Some of the things that I do, I will.
Oh, we're gonna come to that.
Okay, but I don't know which of these things it is.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. We're gonna come to
wait.
that.
All right.
And so what is important to remember is that there's a lot of stuff out there that fall under the umbrella of stress management techniques that are not as effective as others. And so one of the examples they gave is talking about, like, self-talk was not as effective as mindfulness and relaxation techniques. And like talking with other people was not as effective. It was interesting. They're kind of like going through a list of some other things that were helpful, but not nearly as much. And there's a reason why. This is the important part. There's a reason why. And I don't know, the study did not say conclusively that this is exactly why those techniques were better than others, but they did talk about what it took to implement the more effective techniques. And there's something that stood out. The things that made the biggest difference were things that involved regular and ongoing practice, like a process that you regularly experience and rehearse. And so when it came down to it, the question of stress management wasn't a question of having tricks in your back pocket when you start to feel stressed, but having an approach to dealing with your stress in a regular capacity, something you're doing and have practiced thoroughly so that when the stress is experienced, it's already available to you and you can access it. We're going to talk about specifics here, but now go ahead, Andy. You had some reflections on...
Well, first, I want to reflect on that, which is that I feel the natural implication, the natural suggestion would be not to avoid challenges because it's an opportunity to practice this and have it become routine.
We'll talk about that too.
And the other thing was a physical technique, and I don't know where the physical technique lies in here. Are there suggestions for that are within a certain category?
Not specifically from their research, but we have some reflections on some of that ourselves. But go ahead.
Do you want me to share it right now?
No, yeah, okay. You wanted to give us another strategy.
Yeah.
We'll wait until the strategy time.
Okay.
But yes, so that's actually a good point. So some of it is conscious psychological interventions, and some of it is not quite as so. Like, if you're talking physical, then you could bridge the gap between like breathing techniques as opposed to thinking techniques, like so. Yeah, we'll get into some of that. Now, before we get any farther, I simply want to say the situation we're presenting, the runner who's stressed out and feeling the pressure and all of that, that's a very real situation. In fact, that a particular runner has shared with us. It's also not unique. It's a situation that many runners have shared with us. So we're not just making a straw man argument here. We're going to talk about how that runner in that situation can better deal with those pressures. All right. So here are our 4, and one of them is going to branch out a little bit into some a few different kind of considerations. But we want to try to tap into the efficacy of the study and say, okay, if meditative and mindfulness practices are just about the most effective that they found, what does that actually look like? And how do we do that? And what would we suggest as ways to do that? And then we'll get into some others. So starting with that top tier, it's important to know mindfulness, when you see that in a situation like this, it could mean a number of things. People do not define it the same way all over the place. And so that's kind of dicey, because unless the studies are using the same approach to mindfulness practices, they may not necessarily be finding the same results. And here's the best way to say it. So I had a colleague who did a mindfulness in schools certification program so that he could actually like teach courses to students. And one of the things he said to me about it over the years was, because there's so many different ways people are trying to define something like that, it's what happens when you get like a culturally popular concept. Then everyone like has their own way of doing it or their own bent toward it. He said that the principle is, and what the word mindfulness originally meant when people just started using it generally, was self-awareness and objectivity. Combine the two. And so the idea of mindfulness as a practice is the practice of being aware of my mental and emotional state, like what I'm thinking and feeling about the thing that's going on, and objectifying that. And so he would describe it as you talk with a student in a school and you say, okay, so what are the emotions that you're feeling? And you don't do this when a kid's like going off the rails, because you have to practice it. You have to have the tools already in place. But you talk about, okay, so what are the things that you're feeling, understanding what those emotions are, and then objectifying it in the sense of, okay, so that emotion is that thing for this reason, and I can now dismiss it. I can say, okay, I know why I'm feeling that emotion, but I'm going to set it aside. That does not happen naturally or easily for any human on the planet. And so in principle, that's why it's a practice. That's why it's a regular and why something, if you were to do this well, you would do it often. And you would do it when you're not in any kind of significant emotional state. And you would do it when you're really, really upset, high, low, or otherwise. And you would do that all the time. Yeah, go ahead.
I love this conversation because it's always good when there are topics that can benefit your whole life. But I do really see this becoming an important thing for people to think about as we are becoming more isolated as a culture. That is what's happening. It's through technology and otherwise. But sometimes we have a hard time figuring out what's true about our thought world, what's true about our feelings. And so it's important to be reflective on this. And we have opportunities constantly. So the good news is there's a lot of opportunity to practice. But let's say that I'm feeling badly about something and I think that others are out to get me because of this bad thing that I'm feeling. Like, these people must feel this way about me. And there's no evidence of that. So when I objectify, as you use that term, the situation, I then realize, no, this is my insecurity, my internal weakness that I'm being faced with, and it's nobody else's No one else contributed to that. There was a situation that I felt like maybe could have, but really what's happening here in my emotions, my emotional stress, you could call it, is that it's shaking up this internal lie or internal insecurity that I have going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's some more nuance to this a bit, right? Because in principle, the idea sounds like it's about getting rid of emotion, which is not necessarily a healthy thing. Like, emotion's good. It's really more about being able to understand the emotion and then make a determination about whether I want to be experiencing that.
I can give an example from running.
Go ahead.
So if you really care about something and you're feeling a lot of nerves about it, maybe even it's trickled into the category of dread. Like, I really want this and now I'm afraid I'm not going to get it. And to be able to have this practice, you lean in and say, it's okay that I care about this. I've worked really hard for this. I've been preparing. I'm strong for it. And to allow yourself to say, yeah, this is important to me. But on the same token, this is important to me. Nothing in my life or other people in my life, they're not going to see me or love me any differently. So being able to put the other side of that coin, identify that, yes, it's important, but no, my identity will not be shaken if I don't qualify for the thing I'm hoping to qualify for, or if I don't PR, or if I don't even finish. Like, what if the worst happens and I get hurt on the side of the marathon course or whatever? That will not change my identity. So being able to put it in perspective, objectify the situation, acknowledge, yes, I'm really excited for this and I want to do this. I've been trying really hard, will help remove the negative piece of dread. Like, it will become more of the excitement, emotion, and feeling than the alternative where the fear and dread set in.
Yeah, so that's a good example. We're gonna talk about the second layer of this in one of our other strategies here more. But the first layer here is the awareness part of it and being able to objectively contemplate that thing. The second part then is, what are the things that I'm telling myself, and as a result, what I experience. So we'll come to that some too, because there's some really simple practical stuff here. Now, I think the key when we think about the concept of mindfulness and try to get rid of all of the like pop culture around it and just distill it down to what we're trying to achieve as a principle with something like that, it's intuition. We're trying to grow our intuitive sense of reality. Actually, let me say it this way. The intuitive runner knows what is real, what is reality, knows what needs to be, like the vision what we're aspiring toward, and then knows what needs to be done to get there, to bridge that gap between reality and the vision. And it's objective, it's straightforward. And so in like an emotional and a mental state kind of thing. And so in that sense, you're trying to grow your intuition. What is it that I'm experiencing? What is reality? Because those are often not exactly the same, which is part of what Andy was suggesting earlier. My emotions tend to come from, well, they don't tend to, they always come from the combination of what's happening and my warped perspective of what's happening, or myself or the world or otherwise. So in growing our intuition as athletes is going to be important.
And what's important to clarify in that, it can sound like intuition all comes from within, but intuition, as it is grown, it is sharpened by educating ourselves on what is reality and what is helpful and useful. Because if we just dive further into our thoughts and feelings without talking with somebody else about it, or by determining its truthfulness, then we can end up muddled and warped. So intuition is not something where we just totally dive within ourselves and look nowhere else. It is learning how to develop how we are perceiving in a good, honest, and productive way.
So that would be an Andy and Zach recommendation outside of the research studies for trying to develop this area better. If reality is an important component within things, then outside perspective is absolutely necessary, because there is no person who is able to purely, objectively observe reality in their own eyes. So not that another person does, but that the more perspectives there are, that the more likely I am to see a little bit more clearly. In particular, the value of being able to contemplate those things with others is always good.
And I think people do desire and want this, and that's why there has been such a worship of the watch, worship of the data. And so that's probably one of the reasons. It's like, if my watch tells me I can do this thing, because they are looking for outside, but then that actually lowers intuition in some regards, because it's just giving you, from very limited data, not all the things, the recommendation or how you should be thinking and feeling. So that's also kind of, I've just noticed that's been one of the solutions for many people to validate. And we're not talking about validation here. We're talking about growing your internal sense.
Yeah, so here's the simple strategy. The way to do this, to try to implement something like what the research was suggesting, is daily or regular. Doesn't have to be daily, but oftentimes it's nice to just do this when you're running, because it's kind of a built-in time for thinking. And so before you start listening to anything, and preferably don't listen to stuff every single time you run, but before you start listening to anything, spend some amount of time on your run that where you're doing is you're inventorying your psychology and your emotions. And so you're just reflecting on, what am I feeling? What have I been thinking like throughout the day about anything? It doesn't have to be running specific, but just what is causing emotions and thoughts. And you're inventorying that. And then you're making determinations like, is that something I want to be feeling? It is not. And so I work on reducing the negative experience there. And that's not something that just happens the first time I do it. But if I do that regularly, practitioners suggest that I get better at ridding myself of unwanted emotions. And so why wouldn't I want to practice that? Like, that's a wonderful thing. And then when the emotions happen unexpectedly, I am more capable of being able to do something with those emotions productively. So that's the practice. It's very simple, and it does not require any kind of formulaic approach to things, although there are some things out there like recommended step-by-steps that sometimes just make it a little bit easier, so that for many of us, it's nice to like do a certain thing in a certain order for a certain amount of time. And so it'll say, for 60 seconds do this, and then for 5 minutes do this. You can always follow those things too. But so that's 1. 2, we happen to be thoroughly convinced that in principle, the idea of meditation and the process of meditation is largely just prayer without acknowledging the higher power consciously in that moment. And so the principal point here is, if it's good for me to think about reality and think about myself and my experiences, it is likewise good for, in that reflection, for me to acknowledge God, being that he exists in that process. Now, you can say, well, I don't believe in God. We can say, okay, well, we do. So we're going to talk about this for a moment, because this is, in fact, closely, intimately linked with stress management as one of the most consistently effective means known to man, and that is prayer. And it so happens to be pretty obvious why. What happens when a person prays? The person is acknowledging a higher power that is benevolent most of the time. I suppose it's possible for people to pray to something that they think is malevolent. I don't, but besides the fact, a benevolent power that desires my good and is in control. And think about what happens there. So the child who trusts the parent feels much more at ease than a child who is alone and estranged and lost. Right? True. Same thing in principle here. And so what we find is, when it comes down to the practice of, it's pretty straightforward. And so as I would practice some kind of self-awareness about my emotions or my thoughts and my experiences, then the next step with that is I take that to God and I discuss it with him. And I ask him for help with it. And I seek his wisdom on it, and all of those kinds of things. And so we're ourselves personally thoroughly convinced that that is in fact the thing that has made the biggest difference for us. If I can speak for you as well, Andy.
No, you can.
And so same thinking applies. It's also a practice. And this is actually fascinating. So this author was once talking about this concept, and he said, I found at one point that I wasn't sure if I believed any of the things that people were telling me about, like higher powers and otherwise. And he's like, and yet I wanted to. Like, that struck me as a thing that was probably good, to live in a world with a God who cares. that seems like a good thing to me, is the way he described it. So he goes, so then I started praying, not really sure if there was anything on the other end of that prayer, but I just did it. And I did it every day, and I did it for years. And he goes, and one day I realized that I actually believed that there was someone listening to these prayers. He's like, I'm not sure when that happened, but it was the practice of. I thought that was fascinating. But we will digress for the moment, and we won't try to spend time at the moment trying to make claims about God's side of the conversation and what he's doing about those prayers we're offering and those words we're sharing. But it is, in fact, when we think about the concept of meditation, and we'll just kind of zoom all the way out here, and any of the meditative type processes, what I need to be able to do to benefit most from these things is I need to be able, whether or not I am admitting belief in God personally, I need to be able to recognize that I'm not myself in control. There are too many things that I can't control that happen, and that needs to be okay. That's the end of it. That has to be okay for me. Otherwise, what am I going to do with those things? They're going to stress me out. They're going to frustrate me. They're going to cause me greater pressures. And I don't want that. That's, in fact, a key component of our conversation around intuitive running and training, is you don't actually fully control the number on that watch. You control a significant degree of it. Yes, we will admit. How much you exert produces higher and lower numbers on the watch, right? However, there are so many other things contributing to that moment. Things like your overall health, things like your restedness, things like your level of cognitive stress coming from other non-running related things in that moment. All that stuff contributes to it, and much of it you don't fully control. And so it's important to be able to cope with the things that, the means that I don't control. The reality such as it is, as we often say.
This is going back to our conversation earlier, but the word that all the announcers love to use, probably number one word, is confidence. That runner is confident coming into this race, or they're running with confidence, or last year when they did this thing, it gave them confidence to compete against this person. You hear it all the time. There is something to be said about confidence in a race, and we talked about having intuition. Well, if we're going to talk about this entire broad subject, I think it's also important to discuss that our preparedness also helps us with our ability to handle stresses in a race. And so being able to come to a race prepared is one of the ways that we can best help ourselves. And I know that sounds obvious, but I do think that that is a key component when we're discussing when we approach a race, not just practicing mindfulness on our runs, which is amazing, but it also contributes to our ability to tell ourselves we can do a thing because we have the training to support that. I know it seems obvious, but I feel like it's important to discuss that.
Sure. That's probably a key component of the fourth strategy. And so in reality, we're talking about ways here to cope with the realities that I'm experiencing in my mind and in my emotions. And so the next step, our third strategy here then, is the part that the research study doesn't specifically go into, but we need to rehearse the actual high-pressure situations. We need to actually experience difficult moments as we've been practicing these kinds of strategies on the side to then put them into practice in the moments that count the most. And so what this comes down to is, even if I have been implementing such things well and truly for a significant period of time, when I get to that goal race at the end, if that's the first time that I'm really in a high pressure moment, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to cope fully and thoroughly. So let's rehearse those things. Okay.
I know I kind of said it before, but I love this thought, and I think it's very helpful for me. It really helps us in framing challenges as opportunities for growth in these types of areas. If you approach challenges in your day-to-day thinking, I am just going to get better and better at stress management, coping, and overcoming, it's going to make me stronger. Your whole approach to daily life can be benefited by that thought. Just want to put that out there.
Sure. So, what are the things that we can do to rehearse the high pressure situations? And it's a very short list, and it's very simple and straightforward. Race more is one.
That's one thing that I very much recommend my athletes do. When they have a race in the calendar, I ask them to look for another race as well.
Yeah, like just do it more.
Or two, as many as they're able to fit in.
Right, and do it conscientiously. Like race with the understanding of I'm practicing the things that I want to be able to do well in the high pressure moments. And so that includes these mental, emotional, and spiritual strategies. That includes these physical, like the training things that I've done, and actually like my race strategy, like all the stuff. But when it comes down to our current focus, the idea here is that if you have been working to try to develop mechanisms like what we've been discussing that help you address the emotions and address them in a way that reduces their negative impact. And so the title of our episode is Turn Down the Pressure, or the Temperature. So if we can lower the temperature of these high pressure things, so we need to actually practice those things in these high pressure situations. So don't just go to a race and see if it worked. Go to the race and expect to need to do those things, like plan for it.
If we think about the very common fear that people have of public speaking, for instance, the more a person speaks in public, the more comfortable that they are. Usually. So
if they're doing it consciously. Go ahead.
A large part of my work for over a decade was giving presentations regularly, like once an hour at points. And so it was something that in the beginning I was a little nervous about, but it didn't take very long of doing it on the regular, on repeat, where I loved it, enjoyed it, and I did not get, even though I was elevated because I was performing, I was not like nervous or upset. My stomach didn't hurt because I had learned that situation, knowing that the result was, it took away some of that like fear. Because like, what's going to happen? Oh, people are going to enjoy and get their prizes. Like at the end result, there was an opportunity to have fun and make people happy. So for running, okay, this is an opportunity to run and have fun to see what I can do. I'm going to find this as an opportunity to see what I can do. And it becomes more of that attitude than like, I'm going to let everyone down. I can't believe that like this thing happened earlier in the week and that the weather doesn't look good. Instead, it turns into, because you've done it so many times, oh, this is another opportunity to see what's possible. And I love it.
Yes. So also more of the considerations and strategy for here in a moment. What Andy is just describing is key. I probably should have reordered these, in fact, because you need to rehearse that kind of thing too. The self-talk stories, what the stories we tell ourselves. We need to rehearse those, and it's for the same reason as these others. So that's not the only time, though, and it's important to remember that you can create higher pressure situations without spending the money to go to a race. And
I argue that you do encounter them regularly without knowing that they're going to happen, like in your life. So
sure, I'm talking about running specifically.
I know you're talking about running specifically, but I do think that it is something that translates.
Oh yeah,
so
it ought to.
I do think that you'll run into lots of opportunity.
It really is just a question of something that is important or something that has higher expectation and pressure. When that's the case, then it's a time that I'm able to rehearse these things. There's another example, though, and this tends to be a key piece of the puzzle for those who really truly are trying to exercise an effort-focused training. Then you're not really using the watch for much, if at all, most of the time when you're training. The watch is a way to make sure that you ran the right amount of time, and that's about it. You don't need any more information from it. But you get to a certain point where it's actually a good idea to do something more explicit than that.
It's called a time trial.
That's where the word time trial actually originally came from. And
not that you were going to run the fastest that you've ever run, or that you were going to run what you will do in a race. It's because you're timing it.
Right, you're raising the level of objectivity, the level of pressure, but also there's a principal point. It really isn't about it isn't about the timing of it itself. I know that that's where the name comes from, but it's about the circumstances of the workout, if you will. So a timed trial, or what has become abbreviated as time trial, is just a race simulated workout. And so instead of doing things like repeats at high efforts or steadier threshold types of running that are a little bit low efforts for longer times, you're trying to do a race type effort for a race type distance. It's the only time in training that you would do that. Fundamentally, we're not talking about our training specifically, but just in general, you don't do 5K at 5K race pace workouts. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You're just doing a 5K race, right? Now, I know some coaches will do things like that in certain instances. All that is they're doing time trials. That's whether or not they call it that. So that's where you have the opportunity, and you actually should do. Now, we do not recommend doing that very often early in a training preparation because it's just not good information. It's not good data, and it's not good physiological exercise.
It's not efficient, because then you're not getting as much of a stimulus for your actual growth and adaptation.
Well, you're not getting the right kind of stimulus
at that point, right?
Yeah.
You don't need that sharpness.
So you do it later in the training cycle of preparation. Oftentimes we won't do more than a handful with our athletes, and it's 2 or 3 of them right in the last couple of weeks. And usually at that point, it's not for the sake of like rehearsing the high pressure situation as much as it's what we're trying to get from the exercise itself. But if you need more, if your concern is higher about the pressure on race day, then this is a tool you can use, and you can use it in lots of different ways. Doing, if you find that when you race certain distances, you feel the pressure more, then time trial those distances specifically.
Unless there's a large amount of recovery time or risk of badly impacting your race.
Sure. So
like, don't do a half marathon the week before a race.
Bad. Don't do bad things. But no, it just depends. It depends on what you're training for. My point is using that as a tool, because you might not want to spend $50 to race 3 times before your goal race. You just might not want to do that. Although the race day is going to be the best opportunity to practice, because there are more factors involved with race day that you cannot simulate on your own. It's impossible. So the level of pressure simply is not reciprocal. So that's kind of the ultimate strategy, which is do all of these things in ongoing practice and then rehearse them in game day scenarios. But the fourth one, which probably should have been the third one, is if you're doing these kinds of mental, emotional, and spiritual techniques to try to engage with reality, with yourself, and with the world in terms of reality. So reality is 2 things, right? Reality is yourself, your internal reality, and then it's everything else, the external reality. And one author puts it, everyone has their own internal reality, and they're all just as real. But that doesn't mean that I'm perceiving other people's realities quite as objectively or perceiving my own. Anyway, so if those techniques help me address those areas, then what does it mean to speak into that? And this is the last piece of the puzzle, which is the things that we are telling ourselves about it. So the meditative techniques are about observing it. And then what do I tell myself in that moment. And this is where you get into, you hear a lot of conversation about meditation is kind of like prayer, and prayer is kind of like meditation, but they are two separate things. And there's really one distinctive reason why they're two separate things, is because the prayer side of it is outwardly focused. Like I'm oriented toward a higher power when I am praying. But meditation is the opposite of that. I'm processing all of those things at such as they are. And so they're still involved, but
I always thought that meditation was the repeat of something.
right.
So
That's what I mean.
feel
You're
like you
processing
can.
those things.
I feel like you can do that either direction.
I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying that they have two distinct kind of elements to them. You can do them at the same time.
I find, this is just a little side note, I find that when you are very tired in a race, it is very helpful to have things, and people call them mantras. I think even more than that, to develop like a few different things throughout a race that you might say and do. It could be meditative, which means it's repeated. But that's part of this conversation. But having that planned out, because when your mind gets tired, it automatically goes negative. In most situations, we're trying to retrain ourselves, right? That's what this topic is about. Right. But when things are hard and there's pain and there's signals of the body that are, saying you're fatigued, it is harder to be mindful. So having those things prepared beforehand to repeat and repeat and repeat to yourself that are life-giving and empowering to you as a runner.
So that's what we were getting to with that research, which was the self-talk piece is not terribly effective at reducing stress on its own. That's why the meditative side of it is the practice, is the first recommendation here, because the objective evaluation of what I'm experiencing, being able to see and reflect on those things prior to trying to tell myself a combating story. It appears to be the case, and this is not something that I have found explicitly discussed yet in anything I've been reading, but it appears to be the case that telling myself a story that I feel like, we were intimating this the other day when we were talking, telling myself a story that I feel like is not necessarily like true. And so when I try to tell myself a mantra that I don't know that I actually agree with, I'm like trying to convince myself of something.
Like, I'm ready for this, but you feel like you weren't really ready for
it.
Right.
Or like you're strong when you're feeling terrible. Like there's a cognitive dissonance there. It doesn't actually seem to work. It seems to have the opposite effect. Well, it doesn't necessarily have the opposite effect, but it has the opposite effect of working. It just doesn't help. This is why the meditative techniques, or the ways that I engage with reality as a tool, need to be a piece of the puzzle for it to actually be effective, according to the study. And so what we find then is that I implement the awareness techniques, and then within that, I tell myself the realities. And this is the part where we have felt, as Andy and I have been discussing this principle, that the key part, we discussed this the other day, so I'm not going to go into it in substantial length right now, but the key part that proves to be successful is that the thing I tell myself is absolutely true. It is not conditional. It is not me trying to change the reality in my mind. It's just simply is true. Like, why am I doing this thing? Like, tell myself why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I love it. Even if it doesn't always feel that way, I know I do enjoy doing this. I'm doing this because I want it, because this is my choice in this moment. Even if it doesn't feel great, that thing still remains to be true. And then you can also tell yourself things like what you're capable of that are not bound to a disprovable moment. So this is where mismatch theory gets us in trouble. Mismatch theory gets us in trouble because the expectation and what we think should be the expectation side of it is different from what we're observing in reality. And so that's where it's like, I'm capable of running this pace. I know I am, but my watch is telling me I'm not, and I'm feeling awful. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, I no longer believe that, even if I'm trying to tell myself that. But I can tell myself I'm capable of doing hard things. Mm-hmm. So right? So because I know I have, this moment can't disprove that reality. because it's already been proven true.
It's already true.
It's already true. So that's what I do when I try to tell myself the story. And this contributes to the mantra kind of side of things. It also contributes to the meditative process. You go through the process of building a practice of awareness, building a practice of objectivity in that awareness. And then you also build into that experience the story, the narrative. Now, what then is the story that I am telling here? And that's where we were saying earlier, we personally have found that the thing that makes the biggest difference there is that God is a big part of that story. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And it is very important because now I can bring that into the story and I can say things in the story that are immutably true regardless of how much I'm suffering.
Yeah.
Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Mm-hmm. So whatever that may be, and I know some people are going to say tongue-in-cheek, they're going to like, well, Zach, how do you know God is real? And I'm just going to tell you, well, I believe it. And so at least in my mind, that's the way it is. But what we find here, as we kind of zoom all the way out, is that it's not that difficult to build a kind of practice that is proven to help us cope with stress and manage stress. But most of us just don't prioritize that in any kind of regular sense. We see it as something when the pressure's high, then I want to try to do those kinds of things. But in the day-to-day, it doesn't really, I don't feel the need for that. And it's hard to necessarily want to spend 10 or 15 minutes on each of my runs without listening to something when I've got a good book going on or a great AtoZrunning podcast episode to catch up on. And so we would suggest to do it, to prioritize it and do it and do it regularly, because it's not likely to make much of a difference if we don't make it a habit, a practice.
If you are struggling on how to begin intentional self-talk, or you want to try something new, it sounds exciting to like have direction in trying something new. This is not something we've discussed yet, but I think from talking with people and from my own experience, one thing that has been helpful that you could try is to layer your training and racing with curiosity. And so when you're in a race, there are so many ways that you can take this. Being curious means you're saying, well, what can I do today? How can I perform today? Oh, this thing happens. And you're like, well, what can I do with this? How many people can I catch? How deep can I dig today? And to approach it with this level of curiosity. And I've heard people utilize this. My sister Donnie was the one who first brought this to my mind years ago now. She's like, I'm just going to be curious, and I'm going to continually like delight in finding out more and more. And so to just with one simple thing, to be able to ask yourself those questions. And then also diving into yourself in that way, like, and this happens before the race, not during it. The questions I just gave you are ones to do during it, but like, why do I do this? Why do I enjoy it? And like having those questions help formulate your ability to create solid mindfulness techniques. And then I'm going to add a fifth to Zach's list of dealing with stress, and that is the physical pieces that have really helped me. And it's going to sound weird, but these are things that have been tested and proven. Okay, so my coach actually brought it to my attention because I would yawn and burp before races. I thought it was weird.
TMI, come
but
on.
He said, I always knew, Andy, that you're going to have a good race because you were yawning. I have to tell you guys, you can intentionally make that happen for yourself, and it is a stress relief. You'll breathe better and you'll feel better in your race before you hype up.
By the way, that's also a misnomer. Andy did not always have a good race if she was yawning before it. This is one of those things that you tell yourself a story like that, but it actually is disprovable, because the day you have a bad race, but you were yawning a lot before, it kind of ruins
Okay,
that.
so it's a technique, though. It's a
yes.
proven technique to help you relax. We're talking about stress reduction.
Right.
The other thing in your races, you've heard me say it before, but relaxing your shoulders. If you're someone who runs very uptight, or you're running a shorter race where you are in maybe a more rigid position because you're firing in a faster, more aggressive way, then you want to bring those shoulders down from your ears, bring those down, and then you can actually breathe more deeply. You have more room to breathe. And then also the breathing piece of it. So deep breaths before you're running. And you might feel weird about this, so maybe do it in the car, but even vocalizing can help you with getting your breath and getting that deep fullness and expanding your rib cage.
Yelling at your steering wheel.
So there are athletes who will yell before their races. That is actually
awesome.
a technique. That is a technique. And also like the low kind of, doing that.
Oh,
like
please
a monk.
do that. Do that on a start line. That would be so good.
And it is helpful because then you're pushing your diaphragm down and you're creating space, and even the muscles surrounding it get a stretch because, believe it or not, all the muscles surrounding your lungs can be stretched by having good breath. And then also another physical piece, Zach's like, I didn't write this in. I think that these are helpful tools is like when you're actually running, if you find yourself tense throughout your upper carriage, opening and closing your hands. So getting that like a full hand open and then closing them again. You can do this before your race too, but that will help you in stress reduction as well, to open and close your hands to release the tension throughout your upper body.
So I failed to immediately draw the connection, but should have, one of the components in a mindful practice is not just the emotional awareness, but the physical awareness. So I'm glad that you brought it back to our attention here, because we should have said at the time, because you should loop that into all of these reflections. But the isolated awareness of the body is also one of those, like, what it is and how is it feeling, and then what can I do with it. And so doing something like while you're running, this is one of the practices, and it's always a fascinating experience. While you're running, try to pay specific attention to one body part and just be aware of it. So like think about your big toe on your right foot, right? Like be as precise as you want. Now, while you're running, it might be harder to do this for the very first time. It might be easier to just do this while you're laying on the ground. Which is what they suggest with these practices first. While you're sitting or laying, you think about one specific body part and you just make yourself aware of that body part and how it's feeling, what it's doing.
And it's helpful for those of us who are still continually on a road for better proprioception. Contract and relax that muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just wiggle it, move it a little. Yep. Yeah, so thank you, Andy, because when we talk about relaxation techniques, some of the layers include incorporating a physical interactivity to whatever the cognitive and emotional sides of it as well. They've talked a lot about breathing techniques as something that helps reduce stress generally. What it comes down to is you have two elements at play here. You have the symptom of the stress and you have the source of the stress, and we want to try to address them both at once.
And I'll leave finally with you, because you know it's my favorite thing to say, one of my favorite things to say, is that smiling is beneficial regardless of how you're feeling, because there's this mind-body connection. If you do decide to smile, you likely will feel better and be able to manage your stress better.
Not just likely. Research proven.
Shows. Yep.
It's an interesting one. It's very
You've heard
fun.
me say it before, but I'll just remind you because I need to remind myself so I don't see any downside to bringing it up again. And then also, of course, we talked about all the mechanical stuff that all falls in line with this, but we've talked about that a lot. So as you're considering what you want to do with your routines for your mindfulness, please go back and listen to routines for your pre-run and then some of those other things you can do mid-run to help you reconnect and re-engage your body.
How much faster do you think Jane Hedengren would be if she ever smiled?
I don't know. She's really fast. Maybe the stern works for her.
Call Diljit Taylor over at BYU and say,
let's practice this. Let's try it.
She could be even faster.
I mean, I am using the word curious. I am curious. And I hope you all are too. Like, you're curious today after listening to this show, what things that you might be able to add to your routines or change about what you're doing in your thought world and in your processes through training as it pertains to your mind, I think that it's exciting. I think it's exciting to know that there's a lot of possibility for growth, and I don't think anyone has arrived. I certainly have not arrived. There are always things that I can do to continually be edifying the way that I speak to myself.
Here we go. It's one piece in the puzzle that can make a big difference to help the runner coping with pressure and however it forms. And there is much more to be said at another time about other topics. For now, we need to get on to running trivia. All right, you know the rules. Running trivia, it's the greatest game ever known to the running universe. We're going to hit the spinner right now. It's going to tell us the topics. Oh, no. The ancient history of marathon majors. See, marathon majors only started like 24 years ago. But we'll still do this because it's going to be fun.
Then just say history, not ancient.
Well, the beginnings, the origins.
AI.
Yeah, the origins. So we hit the spinner and it gives us a topic, a time period, and a focus area. And so for today, our topic is marathon majors. The time period is origins. And the focus area is top women's performances and performers. So that'll be something different. I'm looking forward to that. We'll have to see what the AI has to say about it. So remember the rules. The rules of the game. We're playing to 10. The first to 10 wins. The loser has to buy the winner a running prize. Topics are randomly selected, so hopefully none of us have advantages. I wonder if instead of marathon majors, we should do marathons in general. Like the origins of marathoning and women's top performers.
Global, maybe add that word because majors, that might be more interesting.
Yeah, we'll keep majors on there. Maybe we'll add another topic option of just marathoning. But we gotta be true to this randomizer and follow what it says. It's gonna give us multiple choice questions, and we get to pick which one we think is the right answer. Sometimes we both guess the same thing. Sometimes we guess different things.
And sometimes you guys are ahead of us, so let us know.
The listeners win.
Please, rub it in. We'd like to know.
There's at least one listener listening right now that I am aware of that may have a higher score than either of us. However, we're not quite sure because we don't know exactly what her score is.
So there's two people
we
that
just know that she has scored points on an episode when neither of us scored any. And so there's something to that. So right now, the current score, Andy has 4 points. Zach has 5. So it's a tight game, which it always is. It's part of what makes it so much fun. All right. Any questions, Andy, before we begin? We got the topics ready to go?
I think we're ready to go. I am interested to see how it's going to pull, if it's going to be like U.S. based or global based.
Well, it's global because it's marathon majors.
All right.
Okay. We are back with our next round of running trivia. And we are, for the topic today, it's going to be the marathon majors, the origins of the world marathon majors. Specifically, we would like you to focus questions on top women's performers and or performances. So women's performers and performances in the origins of world marathon majors. Go ahead and give us the first question. Remember to give us 4 options, one of them being correct.
Sure thing. Let's jump into the world of the marathon majors and some standout women performers. Here's your first question. In the very first year that all 6 world marathon majors were officially part of the series, which female runner won both the London and the Berlin marathons in the same season? Here are your options. 1, Paula Radcliffe. 2, Catherine Ndereba. 3, Irina Mikitenko. 4, Dina Kasta.
You got an option? I've got
I don't know
my
what
guess.
year. Did he say what year?
No, that's the whole point.
Okay,
That's why it's a fun trivia.
Right.
3, 2, 1, go. Oh, I don't know who that is. Okay, I guessed Paula Radcliffe, and Andy guessed
feel like it happened
the
way before
third
that.
option. Not even close.
No?
No.
Oh,
what was the correct answer?
All right, nice guesses from both of you. The correct answer is actually Irina Mikitenko. She managed to win both the London and Berlin marathons in the same season when the World Marathon Majors Series was fully underway. So well done if you picked her.
Thank you.
Good work. I didn't even know who she was. That was just good instincts.
Yeah.
You just went with a name that you thought.
It sounded right.
Yeah.
It just sounded
Good.
right.
Well done. Okay, let's go with another question. Give us a second one.
Absolutely. Let's keep it rolling. Here's your next question. Among the 6 World Marathon Majors, which woman was the first to win the New York City Marathon 3 times in a row? Here are your options. 1, Greta Waitz. 2, Tegla LaRupe. 3, Mary Katani. 4, Rosa Mota. Go ahead and make your pick.
3 in a row. That means someone who's got a lot of marathon majors victories. Okay, I've got my idea. You
I
got
think I
yours?
need them listed again.
Give it to us one more time. What were the options?
Of course, here are your options again. 1, Greta Waitz. 2, Tegla LaRupe. 3, Mary Katani. 4, Rosa Mota. All right, lock in your guess.
3, 2, 1, go. I don't remember the option. It was Mary Chiatini is my guess. Is that 3?
Yeah,
That was
3.
Okay.
Mine was Rosa.
We guessed Mary or Rosa. What was the correct answer?
Nice job. The correct answer is indeed Mary Katani. She was the first woman to win the New York City Marathon 3 consecutive times. So if you guessed her, you got it right.
That was my first instinct, and I was like, no, I feel like that's been too recent.
No.
Because she was on her streak. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
well, who knows? She's won, what, 7 titles? 6 titles? I can't remember how many she won.
lot.
But, yeah, good. Okay, we need one more. We need a tiebreaker for this round. We've each got 1 point. Give us a third question, please.
Absolutely. Let's settle this score. Here's your tiebreaker question. Among the women who've won the Boston Marathon, who was the first official female winner after the race formally allowed women to compete? Here are your options. 1, Bobby Gibb. 2, Catherine Switzer. 3, Nina Kushkik. 4, Joan Benoit. Go ahead and take your guess.
Oh, man. Okay, I've got my guess. You got your guess? Okay, well, 3, 2, 1, go. You said Joan Benoit. I said Catherine Switzer. And I did that because I figured you'd guess Joan Benoit, and I wasn't sure, so I wanted to guess something different. All right, what was the correct answer?
Well, that was a strategic guess, but the correct answer is actually Nina Kushkik. She was the first officially recognized female winner of the Boston Marathon in 1972.
All right, so the main problem with that question was it had nothing to do with the majors because the World Marathon Majors didn't exist yet in 1972, but it was still fun and interesting.
Yeah.
And that's what always happens. Have you noticed this? The AI's
Deviates.
on topicness gets worse the longer you ask it to reiterate. So you always have to give it the whole topics over again if you want it to stay on. We'll probably need to do that next time.
Those were interesting facts, though.
We
and we learned
tied
something.
today, 1-1.
I'm still behind then by 1. I
Behind
should
by
have gone with
1.
my instincts with Mary.
Yeah,
Gosh.
you would have won the day. You would have tied us up. Yeah.
It's all good.
Okay, sorry. Well, as it were, that was another great round of running trivia, learning a little bit more. I need to, what was her name? Adina? Who is the one that it first asked about?
What do you mean? Nina?
I don't remember. I don't remember her name. But anyway, that's someone I want to look up because she won what? Boston or London and Berlin in the same year. Yeah, always interesting stuff.
Yeah.
We're learning new things every time, which is why we do it.
Yeah.
So stay tuned next time for we won't be able to win yet because Zach has now 6 points, Andy has 5, but we're edging closer to 10. See who can get there first. All right, everybody, time for some running news from the world of running. Not a lot going on in the last week. I know at the time you're listening to this, you've probably already seen the results of the NCAA cross-country championships, but we have not yet. So we're not going to report on it. But we are going to tell you what we think might happen, and then it'll be kind of funny because you might be able to prove us wrong right away. But it's an exciting year. It is an exciting year for NCAA cross-country. It always is if you're one who pays attention to it, but this is one of those years where there's a little bit more attention from those who don't normally.
And I think that what's particularly exciting about our conversations about Jane Hedengren is that she's so young and is one of the best runners, period. Not just in NCAA history, but she right now is a standout American distance runner. And so globally. Yeah. So I think that this is fun because we're seeing this emerging star, and we've seen emerging stars in the past, but she's probably the brightest we've ever seen. And I think that's exciting too because there's a few years before the Olympics, and what could she do there? Could she really knock it out of the park. I knew that there's a lot of exciting things to come before that, but it's fun to let your mind
tall
go.
Order. Go from she was the best high schooler to an Olympian. We'll find out, won't we? But there's time. There's time. Here's what's abundantly clear. So Hedengren's a true freshman at BYU. Rarely ever are freshmen in the Division I scene immediately contributing to the NCAA's top tier. Hedengren was already going to, because she ran in a high school faster than almost everyone has ever run in college. And so it was already abundantly clear that she'd be an immediate contributor unless she was hurt. But she's done even better than expected. And so as a true freshman, that's particularly relevant because she's entering a new system. She's going from whatever she was doing in high school to now Diljit Taylor and whatever they're doing at BYU.
Which seems to be good.
BYU knows their stuff because they've had a lot of success lately. Are they the defending NCAA champions in cross country as a team? I can't remember if it was last year that they won. But on the men's and women's side, two different coaches, but they both know their stuff. And as it were, Hedengren has been breaking records. She's been just truly taking the NCAA by storm. I could see her being a one and done athlete. I could see her
straight to pro.
Yeah, I could see her breaking some NCAA records, winning a handful of titles in this one year, and then being like, "There's nothing left for me in NCAA. Like, there's nothing here to gain, except for to not make as much money as I would professionally."
I would have agreed with you probably like 5 years ago. But now that they can make money while they're in school and be earning in similar ways to professional only runners.
Yeah, but it's not
But also
nearly
her
as much.
coach is really good. So the advantage of like moving to a different group wouldn't be as
But she wouldn't
appealing,
have to.
right?
Right, she wouldn't have to. If she ran for the
She's also coaching.
Right, if she ran for the
professionals.
Nike group in Provo,
It's true.
which is Diljit Taylor's group, she could still run and train under the same system.
I hear you. So I guess the question would be, does she feel that the schooling part is deterring from her ability to train? If it's not, like if she doesn't feel like her load is too difficult in school, there's not a ton of disadvantage to getting that schooling completed while being a professional athlete.
Yeah, but she doesn't even have to do her own school. I'm sure that they have people on staff that just do school for the kids.
She still has to earn her degree.
Really though. Oh wait, no, she's not an NCAA football player. They are the ones who have people on staff.
Okay,
who do this.
Mr. Critical.
All right,
Mr.
well,
Snarky.
here's what happened at regionals, and this is why everyone thinks Hedengren is just a lock for the title. By the time you're hearing this, she already finished that race, so let's find out. But she won her region by 40 seconds over an NCAA record holder and national champion Pamela Koske.
Who's also she's Olympian as well, right?
Yeah, I couldn't actually remember if she made it to the Olympics or if it was just the World Championships this year.
Okay, well,
but either way, she's globally competitive. And so she beat her by like a ton. Now, people are like, well, yeah, but Koske had a rough summer and very much underperformed at the World Championships, which was only a couple months ago. She's not like back into full training yet. So, okay, whatever you want to say. Hedengren still has been breaking records. So she's still running faster than anyone else ever has on some of these courses. Here's what Diljit Taylor, coach at BYU, said, which I thought was silly. She starts talking, like, people are like, what do you think? Coaching Jane Hedengren. Diljit Taylor's like, wow, she's coached plenty of girls who run 840 and sub 15. I'm like, no, she hasn't. Well, Hedengren's the first one who did that in high school.
I think that.
What is she talking about?
I think she probably meant this is how it would be true. She's talking about women in general that she's coached.
Because she's talking about girls.
She may have used the word girls, but I think she probably is just talking about like broadly all the women she's coached.
You're being gracious. I mean, she actually was specifically talking about young athletes who were coming out of high school. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure the point. But the other part she said in the interview that just really bothered me was they were asking her about generational talent, and she says she doesn't call Hedengren a generational talent. She calls her a generational talent. Okay. That should never have been said out loud.
I think it's funny. It's fine. It's
not
cute.
Okay.
It's
it is
cute.
not okay.
It's okay.
But you can't take this human seriously anymore.
I take her seriously because she has really good results.
Yeah.
And I admire her very much.
And by the way, if Hedengren wins the or won, we should say, past tense, because it's already happened. If she won, she's the first true freshman to win the NCAA cross-country title in 40 years.
That would be phenomenal.
Incredible stuff. On the team side for the women, by the way, everyone thinks BYU is a big favorite. They are the defending champion, I think, or at least they won in the last 2 years. But NC State women's team, we cannot forget NC State's team is deep. And I know that people are saying Grace Hartman is hurt. She has been hurt. Is she still? Who knows? But they've got Angelina Napoleon, who was in the World Championships. They are sitting pretty. Their team is so strong. And so if Hartman's healthy, I think BYU's got a tough battle on that one. And on the men's side, by the way, we can't forget that there's some significant NCAA talent right now in the likes of Habtum Samuel out of Eritrea, running for New Mexico. He set an NCAA record, but for Nico Young in the 10,000. He won the national championships, but for losing his shoe and finishing second instead. Like, he's got all these near misses, but he's incredible. But there's others. Don't forget about Brian Musau of Oklahoma State. He's got the 5K indoor, 5K outdoor double title last year, which is very impressive. Rocky Hansen, though, is kind of like in the conversation. And the reason I wanted to bring this up at all is because Rocky Hansen was a part of that class of high school boys that was just incredible, right? The young twins. I can't remember his name, but he went to Oregon, and he Simon something or other. So remember that class had like 20 boys that ran sub 4 in the mile. It wasn't that many, but it was like 10 boys who ran sub 4 in the mile that year. Like, it was incredible. And Rocky Hansen was one of them, but he was kind of like not really talked about. He was kind of under the radar. And yet, at this point in time, he's probably rising to the fore beyond all of them. And it's really been interesting to watch. So Rocky Hansen might, in fact, have a chance at that cross-country title based on an incredible season. So
Well, let's move on to the things that have already happened.
Well, no.
It hasn't happened yet?
No.
Oh, my goodness, Zach.
I know. That's what I'm saying. There's not a lot that happened, but we did want to at least mention some of the excitement on the high school scene that's coming up. Nike Cross Nationals is on December 6th.
Okay.
The regionals, Nike does a number of regionals, and they are scattered over a couple of different weekends. Those are going on. Brooks Cross Country Nationals is on December 13th.
Well, this is exciting.
So
where are these going to be aired? Do we know?
I don't know.
Probably Runner Space.
Runner Space, most likely.
Okay.
But you can watch it later.
Okay.
I'll
be patient.
It should be noted that the Nike Cross scene is even more competitive than it's ever been. The race has just grown and grown. And so now we're getting things like just about all the top runners in the entire country have been running it. So we might get like a true national championship if in fact they all show up.
You know who I'm rooting for, right? I don't know which one she's doing. But
Addie
Ritzenheim.
I'm sure she's running Nike.
Kaylin and Dathan Ritzenheim's daughter.
Yeah. She might do both. I don't know. But I'm sure she's running Nike at least. We'll see. Addie Ritzenheim, as a sophomore, won the Nike Cross Nationals 2 years ago. Now, as a senior,
I'd love for her to see her do it.
Routinely ranked in top 5 in the nation by certain rankings, DieStat among others. So we'll see the change she's got. All right. And then lastly, just a few other things in the headlines that we wanted to kind of touch on, some odd things that are going on running publications. Apparently, there are some who think that the running shoe pendulum is going to swing back to the barefoot minimalist stuff.
No.
It won't.
Not for performance, but maybe for training.
Well, here's the thing. It won't ever fully swing back in the way it has in the past because we've discovered what the shoe technology can do for the longevity of the running. So we now know, we have enough information over enough time to realize that running in these like super fluffy foam shoes preserves your health much better than anything else has historically as far as running footwear. So yeah, it's true that you can build strength and the natural running thing, like there's a lot of conversation around that, but it just is not true that it actually preserves the longevity of running. Like, we know that. So all the born to run ideas aside, no, the pendulum's not going to swing back. It could do things. It wouldn't necessarily stay totally all the way to the extreme of make the shoe as thick as possible, but
I think people are becoming increasingly aware of foot health, which I think is a very good thing. But that I don't think that's going to change super shoes at all.
Well, here's the reality. So it's true that you can objectively extend the longevity of your running by making sure that you wear more soft and responsive footwear, but also you inhibit certain movement patterns. Right. And that by itself is not a productive thing for you. And so the wise runner is aware of the value of your foot doing the things it should do without a shoe on, but is not training in barefoot running shoes, but maybe doing things like walking around in them, which is what the article suggests. And so good, props to them. This is a Runner's World article recently published. And also doing something like a 5 or 10 minute jog here and there in barefoot on grass, or in minimalist shoes like the Vibram 5-finger shoes, some of those kinds of things. That's a good idea, but you need to be very careful. And here's the key. This is what Phil Wharton used to say at the very beginning of the biggest of the minimalist crazes. He said, don't start by putting on minimalist shoes and running for 10 minutes. Start with foot strengthening exercises and stretches so your foot can move the way it should move, and mobilize it, and so that your foot is strong in the ways it needs to be strong, so that you don't go out there and just injure yourself for no reason.
And I know many of you have experienced this, but proprioception of your feet is really hard. So it's not really intuitive to very many people. So do that toe yoga. And many of you know you've been to PT and you have dysfunction with your big toe or whatever. You have weak big toe. Do the toe yoga first, because you want to do it correctly before you go minimalist. Yep. Or not. If you don't go minimalist, it's still a good idea to get your feet strong and get that mind-body connection with your toes going.
Last one for today, an interesting article published by Run by Outside about a particular runner's experience training for a half marathon and only being able to run 2 days a week. And the conclusion drawn, so I hate this that they do this with headlines. It's like, I ran a half marathon on only 2 days a week of running. But she was training every day. She was doing a lot of cross training, and it was out of necessity. It wasn't like a suggestion. But the article's headline is like broadcasting it like, here's this great idea. Anyway, I don't know. It's clickbait, right? And it works.
Because he clicked on it, and now he's talking about it on air.
Yeah. I was looking for something like that too, trying to find something that looked like a kind of odd, offbeat article. And this one's fascinating because what she really breaks down is she talked to this coach who then said, okay, well, we've got to so her issue is she just keeps getting hurt when she's trying to train. And it's like, okay, well, you're fragile. Your body is fragile.
Your big toe is weak.
Yeah, right. Whatever the thing is. We need to work on that. And so they did, and it helped a lot. But the whole season ended up starting in a state of injury, which is why the running volume wasn't able to be built up significantly before the race. And then she still was able to run well at the half marathon. And her reflection was the reason she's able to run well at the half marathon was not because she was doing some significant amount of running. It was because of all this other stuff she was doing, and it helped her. So it's not a one-to-one replacement. No. You don't say, oh, well, if I only run 2 days a week and I just bike a bunch and do all this weight training, then that will be the best way to train for running. That's not actually the point. The point is these other things make a big difference.
Be healthy first.
Yeah. So anyway, it was good to think about in the long view there, and it's what does it take to be more durable? Mm-hmm. If I were to use the phrase that a runner recently shared with me in an email that I thought was just awesome. He's like, I feel like a more durable runner now.
I love
as
that.
I'm implementing some of this kind of stuff. And I thought,
fantastic.
What a reflection.
Yeah.
There you go. Plenty more to be said, because by the time you hear from us next, we're actually going to be able to share those NCAA cross-country results with you, and we're going to be very excited about it, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We love chatting about running with you. We would love to do it more. So if you have questions that you want us to share on air, or you just have questions in your own training, feel free to reach out to us via email would probably be the easiest.